Hello and welcome to Gathering Folds. Today we're going to be talking about alternating equilateral triangle twists. So we're using the equilateral triangle tiling and using the concept of alternating to help us find the key features in the tessellation and be able to fold it whether we see it in a photo or in a crease pattern. So first off, what are our options here for alternating? We can alternate closed and closed. We can alternate open and open. We can alternate open and closed. And we can put those on the opposite side as well for all of those options. And I'm going to go into a little bit more at the end that you can also, and you can change spacing. So we've got twist A, twist B, side spacing. Then we can also go in and say, oh, this cluster of twists forms a triangle in its tiling. And we can see that in the pleats by saying, oh, there are 3 directions of pleats around this cluster of twists, and none of the pleats are overlapping. They're all evenly spaced around. And so we can treat that as a triangle cluster as well. And so I'll go into 3 different ways to do that. You can see I have many more than 3 examples, but 3 structures to do that at the end. So if you're folding with me, grab your grid. I'm going to be working with a 24-fold triangle grid on a square. And I do have my eye on the chat, so if you have any questions, please let me know. And what I'm going to do today is fold alternating open on the front and open on the back. We have, this is the analogous tessellation to what we did last week with the squares. And if you saw from my stack, it's missing from my collection. So when we have these 2 twist options and we have the 2 sides, you might think it's 2 times 2 choices for twist A, 2 choices for twist B, 2 choices for front or back. 2 times 2 times 2 is 8, but there's actually 2 of these that are indistinguishable. And so we can't tell apart closed, open, opposite from open, closed, opposite. And so we pare down the options a little bit to get to closed, closed front, closed, open front, open, open front, closed, closed opposite, closed, open opposite, and open, open opposite. So there we go. We're getting into how all of this really works at a fundamental level. And then of course there's the additional variable of spacing, but I'm just focusing on the ones that are densest together to make maximal use of our grid. So let's go ahead and start folding. I'll grab my pens, and it doesn't really matter if you're using a grid on a hexagon or on a square. The important thing is that you have like some reasonable amount of grid divisions to get everything onto the paper. And it's a tessellation, it repeats forever. You can have as many repeats as you want, so use the grid that you're comfortable with. And again, this is a 24-fold triangle grid on a square. So the first thing I'm going to do, just like I do with all my tessellations, is find the center of the paper. And on this grid, I'm going to find my center line by folding in half, and then I've got a mark on the edge. I additionally have a intersection from where I did the odd division, and that will point me straight to my center point. And opening up, I'm going to choose to have these triangles around the center spaced out a little further than the densest spacing, because the densest spacing is a royal pain to fold. If I was doing closed triangles, it would be pretty straightforward to do the densest possible spacing around a 1 grid edge hexagon in the center, or choose to do the 2 grid hexagon to get a different effect. So this one you're going to have a lot of lines on the twists lining up. This one you're going to have this nice star shape in the backlighting. But we're focused on the open and open on opposite sides, and if you do that around this tiny hexagon in the middle, you get really dense spacing and you end up having to fold through twists to get more twists, and that's not the difficulty level that I want to focus on today. So we're going to be starting that a little bit further out with our hexagon out here, and I'm going to go ahead and mark all of the edges of the hexagon. I'm using red for mountain, blue for valley, and dashed on the valley. And the way that we're going to determine our twist direction here is going to be to say, okay, I've got my central hexagon, and this is the key feature for centering this tessellation, and I want to extend this mountain and have another mountain beside it, and this is going to find me my target. Actually, sorry, that was a mistake. Not those. It's going to be out here, because we don't want the valley running to the corner of the target triangle. Sometimes the mistakes are more teachable than doing it right the first time. So you want to have that target triangle away from the valley relative to its parallel mountain. So now, when I bring up these 3 mountain folds, I know which way they're going to twist around. With all my open twists, I always know which way the mountains are going to twist around, because they can't fold into the open center, they have to fold out around. And then I'm going to squash this open triangle, grab my bone folder, and squash it all the way. And so, a bit of a paper note, I'm using Skytone. You wouldn't necessarily have to use Skytone, but I do recommend using a bone folder. This tool will save your hands and just makes your folds a lot cleaner and easier to work with. And even if you're not going to use it to squash your twists, I definitely recommend using a bone folder on your grid, because that makes setting everything else up so much easier. So we've got our open triangle twist, and I'm going to flip to the other side, because that's the thing with alternating. All the neighbors of one are of the other type, in this case, open triangles on the back. And I need to pay attention to where my center is. So my center isn't out here, it isn't out here, and I can see from seeing that my center's in here, partly because I'm seeing through the paper and seeing these pen lines that I drew. And I can tell that I'm going to need a valley here, because it was marked mountain on the other side. I'm going to need to use this pleat, and that means that my target triangle is right out here. So if that's my target triangle, I'm going to open the pleat coming from the previous triangle only until I can put in my next pleat going out around the target triangle. get all of my pleats in and squash. So unlike the densest possible spacing of open triangles that I was showing earlier, the corner of this twist is coming only to the corner of the closed hole of the other. We're not taking paper out of that, the open hole. We're not taking more paper away from the hole in the center of the triangle on the opposite side. And that will be a reference that we use as we move forward. So we've got 2 triangles around our central loop of 6. By the way, if we're alternating equilateral triangles, we're always going to have loops of 6. Anytime we're using only equilateral triangles, it will be loops of 6. And I've done one side around this first triangle that we put in. So we've got another side here that we can work on. We know from this that the corner is going to come exactly to this point. And where the corner goes is where the valley comes out. This is just how these things work. So you see the valley under here goes exactly to the corner. This is a feature of all twists. And so we've got our target triangle there. And we're bringing our third pleat into place and squashing that twist. Now you might have noticed that I rotated the paper as I was putting in that twist, and that's because I find it easier to work with things close to me and on the right side of me. And if you're left-handed, you might have the opposite tendency, but if you're right-handed, try and keep things kind of closest to you and pleats to the right of you, and see if that helps. So next up, if we're going to continue around the central loop of 6, we're going to need to flip to the other side, because both of the places where we can put new triangle twists on that central loop are on the other side, because their neighbors are on this side. So flipping over, and actually I'm going to flip so these parallel pleats stay on my right, so I can continue working on my right hand side. And I'm going to start with the pleat at the top of the stairs. So we have this stair step parallel pleat style. And just like the last twist that I put in, I'm going to reference it by the corner touching this open hole. And then we've got our mountain, sets up our target triangle. And we can put in our new twist. And here comes the part that was hard about day 3 and 4 of Advent of Tess, which is the triangle wrap. So what I'm going to do, I already have the valley marked here around my central hexagon. And I'm going to pop the mountain down at the valley, run the valley one spacing past the mountain, and notice I have another valley here that I'm meeting down in the bottom. And then I'm going to let those two valleys combine together, join forces, and run out to the right hand side of the paper. Now, if you have 3 folds of the same orientation, that will not fold flat on its own. It needs a mountain going to that same vertex to get it to fold flat. And so the mountains will be offset, 3-way intersection, offset 1 spacing. And if I pull those up into being, I get my wrap. Now this isn't all folding flat yet because I haven't put in the third direction of my new triangle twist. And so here I've got my latest open triangle twist, and I can close that up, get everything down and flat, and notice that that wrap really locks around that open corner and gets it in place nicely. From here, we're going to flip over to the opposite side, and I've got this three-way intersection from the wrap, but if I just squash that, that's going to get me a closed triangle, and that's not what I want. What I want is an open triangle. And so two of these pleats are fixed in place. We can't move them without moving other things. But this third pleat, I can shift the mountain down one spacing, put the valley on the opposite side, and now I've opened up into an open triangle twist. Now, one thing to look out for here is you might accidentally shift the mountain one spacing too far. And so if you see that you're outlining two grid spacings on a side, that's too far and you need to back up one. So this is what we're going for, and we can double check that we've done it right because the corners will meet the corners of the open holes on the opposite side. So now that we've seen the basic technique, I'm going to speed it up a little. Right now we have 6 twists in place, which means that we have 6 pleats, each in a different direction. And so I'm going to pick one that's convenient. It's a pleat coming from a twist on the opposite side. It's on my right-hand side. This is very convenient for me. And so I will set up my next open triangle twist on that pleat and squash. Then I see that I now have 2 sets of stair pleats that need twists on the opposite side. So I'm going to flip over, and I started here, and I'm going to try and find, okay, these stairs, I'm at the top of the stairs coming from that twist I just did. Notice I've rotated things around. Things were pointing this way, and I rotated them so that set of parallel pleats is pointing to my right. And so I'm going to put in the next open triangle twist here. And for now, we'll just run through, have a pleat overlap down below. So we've got that one set up, and we're going to do the exact same thing we did to put in the 6th triangle in the center here to complete, or rather the 5th triangle and then the 6th at the wrap to complete this loop. So again, the valley is going to come from the corner of the hole. It's going to outline this 2 grid spacing per edge hexagon in the middle of the loop of 6. So in alternating triangles, we have the same loop of 6 everywhere. And the valley is going to run through until it meets the next valley. And then that is going to run a 3rd valley out to the edge of the paper. This time I'm going to set up my triangle first. And notice as I set up this triangle, I don't run this mountain past this valley, past this intersection of 3 mountains that I'm using for the wrap. And that folds under, and I can squash this latest triangle. Flipping over, I can resolve this wrap into an open triangle. Notice I'm shifting the mountain over one spacing to get that target triangle up in the center, squashing my triangle, and then moving on to the next set of parallel pleats. So I'm working around in a ring around my central loop of 6. So this pleat is at the top of the stairs because I bonk my toe, I'm at the top. And this time I'm going to show a faster way to put this in, but if you are not comfortable with the triangle wrap, don't attempt this yet. So I'm going to run my pleat for my new open triangle just until the valley from the next one will cross it. And so I'll set up both of these triangles on this side and set up the triangle wrap at the same time. So this is a cool feature of the equilateral triangles tiling, that you can often set up a whole edge of triangles at the same time, whether they're on the same side or opposite sides. And then I'll flip over and again resolve that wrap to an open triangle twist. Now I've got a new set of parallel pleats and I'm going to do exactly the same thing. So I'm running this mountain only down to where this valley is going to come through. Setting up the wrap alongside both of my open triangle twists, then squashing each twist in turn. Before flipping over. And notice this movement I'm doing here. I'm shifting the mountain as I lay it down over its new valley and getting that new twist in place. Continuing around, I've got another set of parallel pleats. And this technique works whether you have open twists, closed twists, a mixture of both. You can pretty much always do this unless you have super dense arrangements of twists, in which case you're going to have more trouble with it. And then flipping over, getting that new twist in place. And now I've got 3 parallel pleats because I've come around to the end of this loop around the central hexagon. And we're going to just work on these just like I did the last one. So I come in only as far as that valley will allow. And this time I'll do it for 3 instead of 2. And I'm choosing to squash from top to bottom because each time I squash one, it lets this bit lay flat, and then I can more easily squash the next and the next. And again, I am keeping an eye on the chat, so if you have questions, feel free to ask. And I can open this guy up and open this guy up. And notice it looks like the pleats want to be there anyways. So this is probably where the pleat was before I put in the previous 3 twists. So sometimes your paper just really wants to help you out. It's nice when that happens. And then if I want to extend this tessellation all the way to the edges, since I did it on a square instead of a hexagon, it's not going to create a very nice border. So I may as well go all the way to the edge. Here I have a partial triangle, and I'm going to set it up just like I did the last several, with both pleats in that direction, getting a new twist at the same time. And squash. Then flipping over to the other side, I can open this twist, and this is like very partial twist. So none of those corners are actually, so like this corner, for example, is not precise on the edge because this is the edge of the paper that doesn't have grid intersections. So that's just another thing to be aware of as you're folding. And then I'll come around, and here I've got a set of 3 parallel pleats. Every time you go out another ring from the center, you're going to have an additional pleat to work with. So that's something to consider. And in this case, I don't have enough paper to do a wrap from the first twist, and it looks like that's going to be aligned on each of these pleats going down. And getting all of those in. So this is a strong sign to me that if I was folding on a hexagon, I would not need to rotate it any to get the pattern elements aligned with the edge. So because all 3 of these repeats are exactly the same relationship with the edge of the paper, I would expect that if I was folding this on a hexagon, just a standard hexagon grid, no rotation, then I would get a nice border, a nice even border, without needing to rotate anything. Then coming down to the next one, I need to flip over, and there's going to be an open triangle here, and it's heading into a partial open triangle. Right here. And there's something left on the back here that can make another partial triangle. And I know this because its corner needs to come to the corner of the open hole. So once you pick your 2 twists and your side and your spacing, you can have like lots of little references that you observe that help you to fold the rest of the tessellation. Coming on around, I'll get another partial triangle here, and another full triangle here, get a triangle wrap. So we will have something on the back here. And just going around finishing up these corners. And flipping over. Even if it's a partial twist, we've still got to move that mountain to get everything in the right place. And if it's giving you trouble, you can go in with your bone folder and smooth it out a bit. It's going to be about there. And coming around, I've got another 3 pleats that are going to give me partial twists that come exactly corner to the edge, just like I had on the opposite side, on the other side of the paper. And so we can see that because I centered this tessellation, and because I have the same twist on opposite sides of the paper, this is going to be an isoarea tessellation, which means same on both sides. And that's like up to mirror reflection, and it doesn't take into account that like half of the twists are right-handed, half of the twists are left-handed. It's just, oh, these are the same shapes in the same relationships on both sides. And so I like to draw a distinction between isoarea tessellation and isoarea folded form, because many tessellations are isoarea in their infinite form, but when you actually fold them, you choose a different center most of the time. And so you don't actually get equal sides in your actual folded form. So that gets me most of the way. I have one flap left to clean up here. And that should be almost all. I left a three-way intersection here that I can clean up. Again, going in with the bone folder to loosen things up if they're getting stuck. And that looks complete. So that's how to fold alternating open triangle twists on front and back side of the paper. Now, like I promised at the beginning, we're going to take a look at some other structures that you can use this alternating triangles pattern in. So grabbing those, you can put together multiple triangle twists to create a larger triangle. And the best example I have of that is this one here. So I put together a central closed triangle and 3 corner open triangles into a cluster of 4 triangles that form a triangular outline. And since I had that cluster forming a triangular outline, I could alternate it, either mirror it on the same side or flip it front and back. So this one, I have the same cluster on the front and the back. But really, as long as those pleats line up, you can have different things in different clusters. And I have a tessellation like that. It's called Siren's Call, but I couldn't find it this morning to show to you. So we've got the same cluster alternating sides, and that's going to be true for all 3 of these that I show you right now. You can have the same cluster mirrored on the same side, and watch my Instagram stories this week for an example of that. Or if you're watching this later on, look in the process 4 highlight. And here we have a slightly more complex version where we are using clusters of 4, but inside of that cluster of 4, we're alternating different sides. So the cluster of 4 here is closed triangles on one side, open triangle on the other. And so we can see that on the 2 different sides. And it's just alternating back and forth. It's using this loop of 6 closed triangles, just like I taught in Advent of Tess day 3. And we can get everything together. And just like alternating normal triangles, we can also space these further apart if we want. So that's one. It's also same front and back. Another version is using that central loop that we learned today, those 6 open triangles going all the way around. We have our cluster of 4, 3 open triangles on one side surrounding a closed triangle on the other. And seen from the other side, we have that closed triangle on the front and the opens on the back. So these triangles are just alternating everywhere within this tessellation. And those last two are another example of really nice ones to fold, because even with the grid aligned with the edge of the paper, you get a nice border. Then another kind of cluster, you can have a hexagon in the middle with 3 triangles on the corners. So then there's 3 pleats coming out of each side of the triangle, one from each triangle and one from the hexagon in the middle. So this makes things a little bit more complicated, because those twists that are next to each other are different twist rotations. So let's say the hexagon is right-handed, then the triangles are left-handed, and then the pleats coming out are not stair-step pleats. They're like a tube and a tube in the other direction. And so you really have to match your pleats in order to use this tiling. So often you'll end up with mirror symmetry, where you have this one cluster that's then mirrored out to create the rest of the pattern. And that often leads to trouble with the center, where maybe your mirror lines are going through and intersecting in the center of a grid triangle instead of a grid intersection. So this is where you want to definitely look at a crease pattern for your start, but then rely on the structure and the symmetry to get you folding through the rest. And another example of this mirrored structure is if you have, so the last one was closed hexagon, open triangles around it as dense as possible. This one is closed hexagon and then closed triangles on the back with tube pleat spacing, and then that is mirrored everywhere. So once again, we've got these triangle structures that are repeating to fill our space. We can take that to the next level if the pleats line up such that they work on both sides. So this is knotted web, and it's working with the same triangle structure as this tessellation, which has an open hexagon and 3 closed triangles. And what's unique about this is that you get a tube on one side and a tube on the other. So we can see that tube more plainly here. And so even if you flip it over, those tubes still match up. And so you can take that same triangular cluster and alternate sides with it. And then if you want to be really diabolical, you can bring those triangles even closer to the hexagon and get knotted web tight. But this one is super hard. Do not fold unless you've mastered many things. But the good news is, even though you do need to fold through existing twists to get this one to work, all of the twists that you fold here end up having grid lines aligned with the background grid anyways, so it's not as big of a deal. Then we can also take, so back to the mirrored triangle structures, we've got a hybrid hexagon twist in the center, going to 3 closed triangles on the corners of our triangle structure that's repeating everywhere. And this one's called close contacts. I think I have it up in advanced twist techniques. A lot of these I think I have up in advanced twist techniques. And it's just wild how much variation of stuff you can get with these, basically these triangles that are filled with hexagon and 3 triangles. You can also do different things in each of these 2 triangles that you're alternating to fill the structure. So here I have the hexagon with 3 triangles on the back, just like we were seeing a while back. So with this one, so it's the same structure for one of the triangles, and then it's alternating with one where I have a hybrid hexagon with 3 triangles on the opposite side of it. And so we're going back and forth between these 2 different clusters of triangular groups of twists. And as long as those pleats match up, we are golden. So the only other set of hexagon and 3 triangles that I know of that you can alternate front and back is this one with the hybrid hexagon and 3 open triangles. So hybrid, 3 open, and hybrid. We're flipping this front and back. This one is called polarity, also available inside of advanced twist techniques. And yeah, we're getting into these more advanced structures just by thinking of collections of things as a triangle. Moving onwards, there's even more ways to make a triangle out of things. Here, I've got a triangle made out of alternating rhombus and triangle twists. So I've got 3 rhombi and 3 triangles, and they form a loop, and the pleats are all coming out this way, and this way. And so we're able to have this be this alternating triangles structure while the interior of these triangles are more complex. And then, so this is ink and rings, and then you can do it even denser. I think I call this one swarm. Yeah, after naming hundreds of tessellations, you tend to forget which one is which. And then I also found variations of this where you can have those triangles and rhombi on opposite sides of the paper, and then get those clusters alternating sides as well. I have 2 versions of that, pebbled and emergent triangles. I have an emergent hexagons too that I would have shown you earlier today, but couldn't find that one either. So this idea of alternating triangles is not limited to just pick triangle twist A, triangle twist B. You can also subdivide that triangle shape into more twists, and I have not shown all of the subdivisions by any stretch of the imagination, and get more and more intricate patterns that still have this recognizable global structure. So alternating triangles is one of those key structures that I think everyone needs to know when you're working with tessellations in any form, whether origami or otherwise. So I hope you learned a lot today. Drop a comment, let me know what you found most exciting in this video. And next week we'll be talking about alternating hexagons and triangles. So this will be the first week where we're alternating 2 things that are not the same. And we'll be continuing on with a couple more alternation series. I've got rhombi and then 2 ways of alternating right triangles in the works. So see y'all next time, and happy folding.